The moment Pam Bondi froze, you could feel the air shift. One question, one simple, unavoidable question, hit the table, and suddenly the nation's top law enforcement official looked like she'd been cornered. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't a trap. It was the kind of basic legal question any first-year law student could walk through without breaking a sweat. But Bondi's hesitation, her scrambling, her evasions, that's what told the real story. And it's why this moment has everyone asking the same uneasy question. What is the Justice Department so afraid to say out loud? She was asked something straightforward. Do the January 6th pardons cover crimes committed later? Crimes completely unrelated to that day? It wasn't partisan. It wasn't speculative. It was about the limits of executive power and the boundaries of the law.
Governor Shapiro. I've spoken to Governor Shapiro. We are working hand in hand, our U.S. attorney, with the district attorney there, hand in hand, just like in Minnesota. I made sure our U.S. attorney and our district attorneys there were working hand in hand. Political party doesn't matter when something like this happens. And I also want to make sure all members of Congress are safe as well.
Okay, and I would reiterate, Chairman Stile and I think Chairman Stile and I agree that at least a part-time in each of the 94 districts would be appropriate. Let me change topics for just a moment.
I'm really quick on that. Yes, we're doing that through our National Security Division, so I think that's already in the works, and I would be glad to meet with you in a secure facility to talk about that.
Very good, thank you. Continuing, in addition to my role here, the committee that I serve on as an authorizer oversees Capitol security as well as federal elections, so I'm closely following the aftermath of January 6th. Recently, several defendants who received presidential pardons related to that day are now arguing in court that the pardon covers crimes like, for instance, illegal firearm possession discovered in a search of an individual's home in California months after January 6th. What's your position on whether the pardons cover these separate offenses?
Yeah, the pardon power rests with the president, not the Department of Justice, and some of that is pending litigation, and I cannot discuss pending litigation.
Well, I'm not asking you about who has the right to a pardon. I think as the Department of Justice in February wrote, the pardon is an act of grace which removes the punishment from a crime a person has committed. It further said, in its effect, the granting of a pardon is in no sense the overturning of a judgment of conviction. It is an executive action that mitigates or sets aside punishment. So as the chief law enforcement officer, what's your opinion, not the president's power of whether he can offer a pardon? That's pretty clear in the Constitution. But for crimes committed unrelated to January 6th, would you suggest that the pardons would cover activities or crimes potentially committed outside of that by the same person?
Well, I don't know if you're referring to Joe Biden pardoning his son after he said he would not pardon Hunter Biden, or the
No, I actually
commutation
referred
of
to
all
January 6th. I'm sorry.
all the sentences that the people that were on death row. I've met with those families.
No,
and all of those sentences were commuted. I'm not going to comment on pardons on either side of the aisle.
So, well, I'm not asking about either side. I'm asking, you're the chief law enforcement officer in the United States. You have a responsibility directly, you sworn oath to the Constitution, not the president. Want to know what your views are on the extent to which pardons cover potential crimes committed by individuals who have been pardoned but unrelated to January 6th.
Do you mean the ones that were done by the auto pen? I'm not going to discuss
right.
anything that
Mr.
could
Chairman,
be or not be
I
pending litigation.
respectfully, you know, Ms. DeLauro accused you of filibustering. I think that's the height of filibustering. This is a serious, serious topic. And for you to suggest that you don't have an opinion or to divert to other things that had nothing to do with January 6 pardons, I think is frankly demeaning to your responsibilities and your job. With that, I'll yield back.
The senator wasn't asking who has the power to pardon or whether pardons are constitutional. He wasn't asking for political commentary. He was asking for legal clarity, a definition, a boundary, a line. And the moment the question was out of his mouth, Bondi stepped away from the law and into a maze of distractions. Instead of answering, she pivoted. She mentioned Biden. She mentioned Hunter. She mentioned auto pens. She dragged the conversation into every political corner except the one she was standing in. And the more she dodged, the more obvious it became. This wasn't confusion. It wasn't caution. It was avoidance. It was the deliberate refusal to say something that should be basic, universal, and non-negotiable. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Telling the truth about pardons would mean admitting something this administration does not want to acknowledge. It would require saying clearly that a presidential pardon cannot cover future crimes. It would require stating out loud that a pardon isn't a blanket shield for anything someone does afterward. It would require putting limits on something powerful figures desperately want to treat as unlimited. And in a system already stretched thin by political pressure, that is the line the Attorney General would not cross. But before we get into why that matters, let's go back to the moment that exposed it all. Bondi was being asked about threats against members of Congress, a serious issue, a tragic one, and she gave lengthy, winding answers that seemed designed to run down the clock. The senator pressed gently, then shifted the conversation. He moved to the aftermath of January 6th, a topic her department is supposed to handle with precision. He told her defendants who were pardoned for their actions that day were now arguing in court that those pardons cover completely separate crimes, like illegal gun possession discovered in a search months later. He asked for her view as the nation's chief law enforcement officer, not a political opinion, not a partisan stance, a legal interpretation grounded in constitutional responsibility, and she froze. Then she dodged. Then she deflected again. She insisted she couldn't comment on pending litigation. But the senator wasn't asking about any specific individual. He wasn't asking for details of any active case. He was asking for the department's general position, its understanding of the law, something the Justice Department has been able to answer for generations, something every attorney general before her has been able to explain clearly. And when he tried again, she pivoted again. She mentioned Biden. She mentioned Hunter. She inserted political talking points that had nothing to do with the question. When he attempted a third time, she deflected to autopens, as if the entire topic had suddenly changed direction by accident. By the fourth dodge, the senator pointed out exactly what everyone watching had already noticed. She wasn't just avoiding the question. She was refusing to even acknowledge it. And this is where the story becomes far bigger than a single evasive answer in a hearing room. Because when the Attorney General cannot articulate the limits of a pardon, that isn't a misunderstanding. That isn't caution. That's something else entirely. That's the Justice Department bending around political pressure. That's neutrality eroding in real time. That's the country's top law enforcement office stepping away from the Constitution and stepping towards something far more dangerous. Let's talk about why this question mattered so much. If a pardon can wipe out crimes committed after the pardon, then pardons become something they were never meant to be. They become open-ended passes. They become tools for political loyalty. They become ways for people in power to shield their allies indefinitely. And if that principle takes root, the consequences are massive. That's why this question was simple. That's why it was foundational. And that's why her refusal to answer is so alarming. Because what she didn't say matters more than anything she did. Her silence hinted at a reality many have been worried about, that the Justice Department is no longer functioning independently, that career prosecutors are being replaced by loyalists, that investigations are being shaped by political pressure instead of legal judgment. And while all of that might sound dramatic, it's exactly what her evasion suggested. An institution afraid to speak a basic legal truth because speaking it might disappoint the person sitting in the Oval Office. And it didn't happen in a vacuum. There are already reports claiming that career officials feel pushed aside, replaced by voices more willing to align with political agendas. Rumors suggest internal reshuffles aimed not at strengthening justice, but at strengthening control. Observers have been warning about a gradual shift, small changes, subtle recalibrations, until eventually the Justice Department no longer stands independently, but instead leans quietly toward the preferences of power, and Bondi's moment didn't calm those fears. It amplified them, because if she had simply said the obvious, that pardons cannot apply to crimes that have not yet occurred, the controversy would have ended instantly. The tension would have deflated. The committee room would have moved on. Instead, she chose silence wrapped in distraction. And that silence said everything. It suggested the department doesn't want clear boundaries. It suggested the administration wants flexibility, legal ambiguity that can be stretched and twisted when convenient. And it suggested that the Constitution's guardrails aren't being protected as firmly as they should be. But here's the part many people miss. Democratic institutions rarely fall in dramatic explosions. They decay quietly, slowly, step by step. They crack in moments exactly like this one, moments most people overlook. Not in coups, not in headlines, but in evasions, in half-answers, in refusals to state truths that used to be unquestioned. When the Attorney General dodges a basic legal definition, that's not a political problem. That's a structural one. It means the legal foundation is shifting. It means the weight of political influence is bending institutions that were supposed to stand firm. And if the Justice Department bends, the entire system bends with it. That's why this one interaction mattered so much. It showed not just what Bondi did, but what she wouldn't do. She wouldn't stand up to political pressure. She wouldn't affirm a constitutional principle. She wouldn't risk contradicting the administration's preferred narrative. And when a nation's top law enforcement official won't do those things, the rule of law doesn't break in half. It just dissolves quietly. And that's why paying attention matters, because if we ignore these smaller moments, the larger ones will be impossible to stop. If we shrug at the evasions, the bigger violations come next. If we normalize silence, we lose the ability to demand clarity. And when clarity is gone, accountability goes with it. What happened in that room wasn't just a policy disagreement. It wasn't just political tension. It was a warning, a quiet, sharp warning that something fundamental is slipping. And if people stop noticing, that slip becomes a slide. So if you care about the rule of law, if you still believe that justice should mean something in this country, then don't look away. Stay alert. Stay engaged. Listen carefully when those in power refuse to speak clearly. And if you want more breakdowns like this, deep dives, real analysis, and the stories the headlines don't explain, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the like button, share this video, and stay with this channel as we keep uncovering the moments that matter. Because accountability doesn't survive by accident. It survives because people refuse to stop asking hard questions, even when the people in power won't answer them.